ESPN Network every Tuesday with The Drive, the motivational talk show for Fairfield County and points beyond. We bring you people, places, ideas, and organizations that live mindfully and consciously, helping you move forward. And we start every show off, every Tuesday, with a Mindful Minute. I know you've heard me say it before, but cursive is not dead. If you can read this next image, you know it's not dead. The importance of cursive, why this comes up to me is that people are not even knowing how to write their own signature. We don't want to go back to the days of signing just the X. Cursive does so many things. It's your creative expression, it's your art, and believe it or not, your penmanship changes from the time you learn traditional cursive in school. And that's where the expression comes in. When you write things down, you remember them. Lee Iacocca used to say, write it down is one step to making it happen. Beyond that, it allows you, it's a form of reflection. You know it from my book, My Daily Drive. We talk about writing things down mindfully. It reduces stress. Other countries don't view us as intelligent as perhaps we could be when we are constantly on the digital keyboard. And yes, those things serve a purpose, but I really encourage you today to kind of put cursive back into your day. Even if it's just a few minutes, write someone a little love note. That motivates them and that helps you express you and connect back with cursive. And the reason why I bring that up today is because my guest believes that too. Writing things down in cursive is so extremely important. And that's not all that we're going to talk about, but I want to introduce you to Kit Shapiro, daughter of Eartha Kitt, owner of Simply Eartha. And if I read it correctly, you found your mom's writings and they were motivational to the business that you run today. Is that correct?
That is correct. My mother believed in writing things down. And there were thousands of pieces of paper, literally thousands of pieces of paper in her home, from napkins to beautiful leather-bound journals, legal pads, yellow legal pads. Anytime something would come to her, a thought, a desire, a motivation, she would write it down.
Now, did you find those after she passed, or did you kind of know about that while she was living?
Well, I knew that she had always written things down in my entire life. That's, she was a writer. She'd written 3 books, longhand.
Longhand.
Longhand,
wow,
yes.
imagine trying that today.
No, I can't. And so I knew that she was always writing. She always had a piece of, notepad by her bed or by the phone or in the kitchen or wherever she was. But I didn't realize the extent of how much she had written and how far back it went. And I found journals dated 1952, 1948. There's pieces of paper that she had written on and dated. So it's really, really interesting to find all these. And some of it is nonsensical. Sometimes it's just, the diary of the mouth, which is
let it out,
which is just a wonderful tool as well when especially when you're an artist. So a lot of it is that, but a lot of it is really, something maybe she heard, or if she was watching television or she read it someplace, she would then write it down because she wanted to remember it. She always wrote her lyrics down to remember them.
What I liked is, and some of the research I did was her Kit-isms, because
yes.
I like those myself. And so in the research I found, it said, when she found something she liked, she made it her own. Do you want to share a few of those that are really powerful and motivating?
So she would say, God may not be there when you want him, but he's always on time.
Right.
Don't panic, which, I have tattooed on my wrist. And she would say these things, and she would hear them, somebody else maybe have said them, but when she talked, she spoke them, and she would repeat them and tell other people, whatever it might be. I think you had earlier, you showed her handwritten, whatever intelligence
She said, whatever intelligence we have to pass it along. And I shared that sentiment because my grandmother used to say that. You cannot be a success until you make someone else a success, which is basically, but what I loved about it was your mother's writing was so creative and you could just tell it was so full of energy.
Her signature, I think she has the most amazing autograph. I would love to, would see her sign her autograph when people would ask, and I always thought it was the most unique, so her.
Yeah.
And I remember as a young girl practicing my signature, know, and
you've got a great signature too.
Well, it took me a long time. And what's really funny is, so I've been married twice. I'm currently married to my second husband. I carried the name of my first husband, and a lot of it is because I practiced that signature and I'd gotten it so good, and I really liked it, and I didn't like my signature of my second husband.
Don't fix it if it isn't broke.
Kept
So let's go back in time. I'm sure everybody watching knows Eartha Kitt and your mom, but let's tell the story because she was such a devout mother and with global superstardom by the time you came along.
That is true.
I mean, that takes a lot to do. There's not one picture where I see you two without like passionate love in each other's eyes. And I read something that said, we had the highs and lows of what every mom and daughter has, and I too have a daughter, and of course I have a mom, so I get that. But tell us, give us some background.
So I'm an only child,
right?
And my mother was already famous, as you mentioned, when I was born, and she named me Kit, which is not unusual in the South for women to name their children their name. Now she wanted to name me Eartha, but she thought, I think because she was famous already, she thought that would be a really huge burden to name a child, Junior, a girl.
Right.
And I had often said to her, what would you have done if you'd had more than one child? Because, I always joked to her and say, you named me Kit so you wouldn't forget my name. And I think I would have been the George Foreman of children. It would have been Kit 1, Kit 2, Kit, if she'd had more than one child. But she used to introduce us at times. She would say, I'm Eartha and this is Kit. Yeah. As if I completed her somehow. And I really think I did. My mother grew up in the South. She was born in 1927 in a little tiny town called North South Carolina.
Tiny.
And she was born on a cotton plantation. They were cotton farmers. They lived on the plantation. My mother's mother was black. She never knew the identity of her father. It was assumed that her father was white, given that my mother had lighter skin than the rest of the people around did. And because of that light-colored skin, she had a very difficult time in the South, and they referred to her as a yellow gal.
Wow.
It was not something...
That's hard.
It's very hard. And she was treated... she was illegitimate, and, she was probably mixed race, and that was just not accepted.
It was hardly accepted in the 60s, never mind the 20s.
Right. And interestingly, in the South, this was the black community that did not accept her being, mixed race. And so she had a very, very difficult early childhood. Her mother gave her away because her mother married a man who said, I will not have that yellow gal living in my house. So my mother had this last vision that she ever saw of her mother when she was probably 3 or 4 years old, was her mother being taken away by this man, and she never saw her mother again, and her mother died just a short time after that, apparently. So the children and the family that she was given to were really brutal and treated her like she was dirt, and not even as well as the dogs.
Yeah.
And she was physically abused, sexually abused, emotionally abused. They would tie her to a tree and beat her with sugarcane switches, which is like razor blades. She picked cotton, which was very difficult to pick a pound of cotton. Doesn't weigh a whole lot. And cotton, which I never understood until I got older, my mother would show me the cotton bulb. The tops of a cotton bulb are prickly.
Needly.
So you get raw fingers and you bleed. Well, not something you can do when you're picking white cotton. So she would be beaten if there was blood on the cotton. And so she would also tell me how she would try to get little stones, and you try to put them extra in the burlap sack, so when they weighed it in, you didn't have to work quite as many hours to get a pound of cotton. But one of the things that she learned from living in the earth, off the earth, and on a plantation, and being treated so poorly, was that she really paid attention to the animals, because she didn't have friends. She was a little urchin and an orphan, and like she said, I wasn't even like Cinderella. Cinderella had it better than I did. So she would follow the animals. She would watch how they interacted, how they ate,
amazing,
what they did, how they took care of themselves. And her name was Eartha. Her given name was Eartha. Those lessons that she learned from watching nature were so a part of how she became who she was, and how she understood the connection of the earth. The circle of life was truly how she lived and taught me how to live. The understanding of how important the earth is and taking care of our earth, and putting good things into the earth, and the earth then would nurture us and give us good things back. So I grew up learning that you don't eat things that don't come from nature. You don't have preservatives. You don't have,
Monsanto doesn't like this
no,
today.
No, not at all. You don't have, anything, food coloring or artificial sugars or,
Chemicals,
any
as I
chemicals.
say. Yeah.
You also make sure that you put back into the earth the
Cut a tree, plant a tree.
Exactly. So we had a compost pail sitting on our counter in our house in Beverly Hills, which was not the chic thing to do. It wasn't a beautiful compost pail that you buy at Williams-Sonoma now. No, this was a literal, ugly pail. And it was embarrassing when my friends would come over and there'd be like all this food sitting there, But my mother understood that you put that back in the earth, and then the circle of life continues. And so that's what I learned. She also, we had a vegetable garden in Beverly Hills, which is where I grew up. I like to tell people I'm from the South, too, Southern California. It's not South Carolina. But we had a vegetable garden, and my mother would have me work with her in the garden, because she worked the garden herself. She loved to have her fingers in the dirt. So if I would see a slug or an ant or a bee, and, I didn't like insects. It's
Who
like,
does when you're little?
My mother would explain to me that they're just as important
Yep.
in the circle of life. They have a contribution to nature and to our environment, so that you can't just see a slug and say, oh, that's ugly, I want to kill it, and
Right.
just be, because you don't do that. So learning that that a slug and an ant and a bee is just as important.
And a bat. I mean, there's so many things that we don't like that are important. Snakes.
Teaches you also that other human beings who don't look like you, or who don't act like you, or you may not like their appearance, it's irrelevant.
Right.
Everybody has a purpose, and we're all here because we have a purpose. And my mother also believed we don't have to love each other. I really have an issue with everybody saying, just love each other. We don't have to love each other. We just have to allow
Accept.
the other person to exist, right? I don't have to
Tolerance.
like what you do, but I can't fight you for it or kill you because I don't like what you do or how you look or what your customs are. It's really just about understanding that everybody is here for a reason, and that's all we need to know.
So as a young child, you're growing up with your mother teaching you to be very resourceful, and you've got the polarities of the yin-yang, maybe a Beverly Hills lifestyle, and certainly an international fame where you're
Yes.
traveling. And how was it different then than it is now for you? Did you feel differently about that experience? I mean, of course, you've got this fabulous company that's revolving around great inspirations, but do you look at it differently now than you did then? What are you doing with that resourcefulness?
Well, so my mother taught me a few things. First of all, that having a sense of humor was the most important. You never take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
And be able to laugh at everything. Be grateful for your blessing of just waking up every day and opening your eyes and being able to see and hear and taste and smell. So those were the real foundations of how I lived and the lessons that she taught me. She also taught me that living in Beverly Hills was not the reality of the world. So when we did travel, and my mother was internationally known, and so we would travel the world, and yes, we were blessed enough to stay in beautiful places and beautiful hotels. My mother understood the importance of learning other customs, other societies, and other countries and living in peoples. So she made sure that she would make friends with anybody housekeeping staff, taxi drivers, people on the street. And these are people who didn't necessarily, we're in Bangkok or in Hong Kong or someplace in Africa. They're not going to recognize her necessarily being a famous person. That was irrelevant. She wanted to see how people lived, where they shopped, how they, what they did, how they functioned. Not the hotel life, and not the tourist life, how the real people lived. So she dragged me, and I say dragged me because I was a Beverly Hills kid who wanted just air conditioning and did television and luxury sheets. I didn't want to be dragged to the streets of Bangkok in 130-degree heat and 2,000% humidity. It felt like. But my mother understood how important it was to show a little girl, a child, from a very, very young age what the reality of the rest of the world looked like. Beverly Hills did not reflect what the world really was like.
Yeah, and nor does it right now today, right?
No, nor does, Fairfield
I
County,
was gonna
Connecticut,
say,
or, Long Island, Nassau County,
Miami.
New York, Miami. There's so many areas. And even within our own country, you go and you see places that, and people who don't live the same way. So I got that at a very young age. I really understood that the way that I lived, was not the norm.
And when we come back, we're going to talk more about how your mother moved from, the Deep South up into stardom and brought all of these great things to you, and your life from that point on. And I think you managed her.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that when we return. And I want to hear more about those kidisms.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll be right back in a couple minutes, guys. It's good to be back, and I'm so thankful that you share this hour with us every Tuesday. It's The Drive. Move forward mindfully and share it. Thanks so much.
On time, done right, safe and reliable. MrHandymanCT.com.
Let our satisfied customers tell it.
I have called Mr. Handyman for every reason, every occasion, every broken item, every leak. They have bailed me out on many occasions, and I would recommend them to anyone.
For any project, large or small.
MrHandymanCT.com.
I'm John Kovach. I'm a newspaper editor. I'm a high school football coach. I'm a television presenter. And I want you to love fishing as much as I do. Tune in to Yankee Fisherman, Thursdays at 1 on the HAN network. It's like going to the tackle shop without leaving your office.
When it comes to local entertainment, we've got it all.
From movies, local artists, etiquette, and more.
Watch HAN Arts and Leisure with me, Steve Coulter, and our Arts and Leisure editor, Sally Sanders, Mondays at 12:30, right here on the HAN network. When it comes to local entertainment, we've got it all.
From movies, local artists, etiquette, and more.
Watch HAN Arts and Leisure with me, Steve Coulter, and our Arts and Leisure editor, Sally Sanders, Mondays at 12:30, right here on the HAN network. When it comes to local entertainment, we've got it all.
From movies, local artists, etiquette, and more.
Watch HAN Arts and Leisure with me, Steve Coulter, and our Arts and Leisure editor, Sally Sanders, Mondays at 12:30, right here on the HAN network. When it comes to local entertainment, we've got it all.
From movies, local artists, etiquette, and more.
Watch HAN Arts and Leisure with me, Steve Coulter, and our Arts and Leisure editor, Sally Sanders, Mondays at 12:30, right here on the HAN network.
I'm so honored to have Kit Shapiro here today, the legendary Eartha Kitt's daughter. We're talking about being resourceful, being mindful in spite of a global superstar upbringing, and what it takes to be you and be so authentic. What I loved about some of the stuff I read about your mom was she didn't care. She spoke her mind.
Yeah.
She told the truth, and she was willing to be okay with that. And
But she didn't know how to do it any other way. So I don't even think, I know she didn't really think about the outcome of what being outspoken how it was going to affect her, because she just assumed that when you
was okay.
when you ask someone their opinion, you actually want to know what they have
the
to
real
say.
answer, not the alternative facts, for example. Okay.
And
good.
she was not one, although she was very deliberate in what she did, she was not one to make things nice. She would state it, not in a mean way, but she would state the facts the way she saw them.
Facts.
And that's how I was brought up. Now, she didn't speak a lot of words. In fact, many times she would say to me, too many words. Once you've explained it, you don't need to explain it again. Right? I heard you the first time. And that she said a lot to people. And she sometimes would be perceived as being very quiet because she was observing. She always observed. She listened to her gut. Really, that's how she really functioned. And that comes, I think, a lot from learning from watching animals and nature exist. I think you realize that that's all instinct. And so if we listen to our guts are almost always right?
Always.
We listen to that inner voice and it tells us something's off.
And don't you get mad when you hear that inner voice and you disregard it, and then
Yes.
the thing happens, you're like, oh, yeah.
And my mother will say, before she passed, she often said that if when I didn't listen to my voice, my heart, when I didn't follow my gut, that's what got me into trouble.
Yeah.
And that so listening to her gut, and teachers. There were 2 teachers that she talked about to the end of her life. One from the South in the Baptist church that she was when she was a tiny little girl, who told her that she had the hand of God on her shoulder.
Wow.
And one from PS 136 in New York City, when my mother was brought, an aunt sent for my mother to come from the South because she'd been told that they were treating her so poorly that if someone doesn't get her out of here, they're going to kill her. So this aunt sent for her. And my mother thought later in her later years, she wondered if the aunt may have been her birth mother, because she looked very much like the aunt. The aunt passed in the 1950s, so she never was able to find out. I don't think she thought that at the time, but she wondered as she got older. So there's these 2 teachers, this one from PS 136 who recognized something, because my mother was very shy and didn't speak a lot, but recognized some type of a talent or desire to be, perform on some level, and helped her and encouraged her to do that. And then she was dared to go audition for a dance company by a friend when they were in high school, and she did, and she won a scholarship to the Catherine Dunham Dance Company, and that's how she ended up touring worldwide and
being found.
by Orson Welles, being discovered by Orson Welles in Paris. And
How old was she when you came along? Do you know?
She was, she would have been, I believe, 37. She would have been.
So she was pretty established.
Not quite 37, but yeah, she was in her 30s, which of course was old. 1961. That was old to have a child. Yes.
Yeah.
And she didn't have any friends who had children, and I often would tell people, tell my mother actually, I thought that God had given me to her because I was a good fit.
Why were you a good fit?
Because I understood that in many ways my mother needed me more than I needed her, or we needed each other. As a child, as a little kid, you need your parent, obviously, to survive. My mother needed me as her foundation, as her stability.
You were her family.
I was the only family she had.
Yeah.
And I gave her roots, I think, to, she was Eartha, so she was the soil, and the soil needs to have its its roots for foundation. And so we were a really good fit.
Yeah. You traveled the world with her?
Traveled the world because she thought travel was much more important than book
I speculate
knowledge.
The highs. What are the lows?
Well, we were a typical mother-daughter,
so you
relationship.
Kibitzed
Yes.
and kind of,
There were many times when, we're driving down the street and, I would just hope that side of the car would, fall off and she would just roll into,
Sure, Ava's saying that about me these days.
and I would roll my eyes and, and say, please don't sing in front of my friends. Please don't sing.
Oh.
And don't even talk, right? And if you could stop breathing, that would be even better. I mean, it was very much a mother-daughter relationship. But given that, that's part of nature as well, right?
Of course.
Nothing is smooth sailing.
No, and if it is, then it's not real.
And when my mother would say to me, God may not be there when you want him, but he's always on time, it really meant that you don't, you just have to take a beat and understand that even though the situation may not be exactly how you want it, there's a reason for it. Maybe we're supposed to learn something, maybe something better is supposed to come along, maybe somebody else needs us.
Right.
Maybe it's not all about us.
I read a little bit about her incident at the White House that I was a little mesmerized when she said something that President Johnson's wife really didn't care for, and she felt outed after that. She didn't even have a ride home. But I felt like the way she handled it was so entirely eloquent.
Well, so the circumstance was my mother was invited to a luncheon with a bunch of other women for Lady Bird Johnson. This is during President Johnson's his presidency. And it was during the Vietnam War. And my mother was against the Vietnam War, mostly because as a celebrity, she was invited to a lot of VA hospitals and would visit with young people who'd come back from the war or who were in Canada and had run away from the war. And my mother wanted to know why people didn't want to serve. And at the time, what she found from the stories that were told was they didn't believe that it was the proper war for the United States to be in. I am not political, and I'm not condoning one way or another. I'm just saying this was the situation. This is how my mother saw it. So when she was asked at the White House by President Johnson's wife, why do you think there's so much juvenile delinquency in the streets of America. My mother's opinion that she gave very quietly and calmly. She didn't scream and yell and make Mrs. Johnson cry, which was reported to be in the press that she had made her cry. She did not make her cry. She stated to her that she thought maybe it had something to do with the fact that many people don't want to be drafted, because we had the draft at the time. They didn't want to serve because they didn't feel it was the proper place and the proper time and the proper war to be involved in. And so they were act out and do things so that they would have an arrest record and they wouldn't have to then serve. Now, my mother was not only rebuffed by Mrs. Johnson at the luncheon, but she was also she was put out of work, literally. President Johnson had the FBI and the CIA try to find and dig up dirt on my mother, and called all of the outlets, the television shows and the clubs and the concert halls that she performed at, and told them that he didn't want to see that woman anywhere performing in the United States. So we found this out when Watergate broke, and Seymour Hersh from the New York Times found a dossier, CIA dossier on my mother, and all of these happenings were laid out for us.
Terrible.
So but my mother, she handled it from day one throughout in a very calm way, because she knew at some point it was going, the truth always comes out.
Truth always comes out.
And she also understood that she spoke her mind. She said what she needed to say because she felt
eloquently
it was the truth for her.
For her.
And that's when you ask someone their opinion.
Well, those are the principles our country is based on.
Well, and that's what she said. I thought freedom of speech meant actually that you could be freedom of speech in the House. It stands for what was the freedom of speech. So she was unfortunately,
But she made a return when Jimmy Carter came back. I read that he invited her.
Yes, he invited her back to the White House and forgave. It wasn't even forgiving her. It was a witch hunt.
Yeah,
really.
it was a witch hunt.
And unfortunately, but what's interesting is my mother was actually much more conservative than people realized. She was not. Yeah, she was not as this liberal who felt that well, she doesn't think war was great. But as time, she was a huge supporter of our armed forces.
Yes.
And
everything made in America.
She was all about made in America. She did not, if you gave her something that was, made in China, she would literally throw it back at you. I mean,
I read that too.
Yeah, she did not appreciate that at all, because she really felt that losing jobs in this country was what started. I mean, she lived through, World War II, and losing jobs, having them sent overseas because it was cheaper labor, was one of the real downfalls of the country.
Well, so was she ramping up her Kit-isms back then through all these trials or tribulations, or was she like this her entire life?
She was like it her entire life. Whether I don't think she necessarily was aware of saying pearls of wisdom, right, when she was maybe 20-something. But because I found all these writings, she was very, very much about philosophical thinking and looking inwards and writing down our feelings. And she was a big reader. She loved to read Socrates and Plato and Shakespeare, and you name it. She soaked up. She didn't have school learning like I was privileged to have, but she knew that you didn't necessarily have to sit in a classroom. You could just go to the library and get a book and read.
So the biggest part of her legacy that you bring forward is her positive self-confidence and her creativity. And what I love about that for this show in particular is, right now especially, and we don't talk politics or anything negative here on this show because there's plenty of that in the world to go around, but what I like our viewers to feel is that, they can do something with this. Where can they make a change? Maybe be less judgmental, maybe be more open-minded. There's enough of sort of this restrictive talk and conversation going on in our world today, not only here in the States, but in our world.
Yes.
So what do you think your mother might say today to motivate people to kind of get out of their own way and make the world a better place?
One of the simple things my mother taught me was, we had a pond by her house, and she would teach me how to skip rocks.
I love skipping rocks.
And so when you would, as a little girl, what do? You go pick up this big rock and you plop it into the thing, and she would say, "Now, do you see the ripples that you caused by dropping that big rock in?" And she would say, "So those ripples will affect change on the shoreline, but the small little stones that you skip will also have change will be affected. It's just smaller. Doesn't make those little pebbles any less important than that, or less effective long term than that big rock was. The big rock just made more of an impact initially. The little rock has less of an initial impact, but still has long-term effect. So her point was, you don't really have to change a lot of people. You have to, maybe you just make one person's day by smiling at them or giving them a compliment. Or maybe you just smile and they see your smile, or you do something nice, you do a nice thing for somebody that then you don't identify yourself, or maybe you do. But it doesn't have to mean that you you have the ability to stand on a stage and affect, the change for thousands of people. Because it just takes a ripple effect of one person doing something nice or being kind to another person, and then that person does it, hopefully, and it goes down the line. So this was a message that I learned for my entire life, and the importance of having a sense of humor, not panicking, right? So we go back to the don't panic again, which, on my wrist. Don't panic, and treat each other kindly.
Right.
Right? You just have to smile, be nice, say thank you.
I always say it's the universal language that 7 billion people understand. It's that smile. We're going to take a quick break. It's how you fuel your mind, your body, your spirit that creates the lifestyle you live. And I hope you think you're fueling it well here today, because I know I am. We'll be back in a couple minutes. It's The Drive here on the HN Network every Tuesday with Denise DiGregole. Thanks for tuning in and sharing.
Want a new experience in car buying? No aggravation, no confrontation, just answers to all your questions. Scap Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram. Car buying the way you want it to be. With one of the largest selections of new 2- and 4-door Jeep Wranglers available, we are Connecticut's Wrangler headquarters. Located in Fairfield, Connecticut, we're easy to get to. Just 2.5 miles off the Merritt Parkway, exit 44 via Route 58 South. Save thousands right now during the Spring Clearance Event and Ram Truck Month, now through March 31st.
Get a fresh start to the new year by shaking up your meal routine. Walter Stewart's Market is your local source for a delicious selection of fresh and convenient salad shakers, like Southwest Salad with chicken, Cobb with organic chicken, Power Vegan with fruit and quinoa, Greek Salad with tabbouleh, and grilled shrimp with hominy. Grab one from our salad case or order from our deli today. Walter Stewart's Market, 229 Elm Street, New Canaan, or shop online at stewartsmarket.com.
Whether you're looking for the freshest seafood, the perfect steak, or want to share delicious appetizers, look no further than the Stone's Throw in Seymour. Chef Peter Hom has more than 30 years of experience creating original recipes in his American eclectic style. Our dishes are made from scratch with fresh, local ingredients that pair perfectly with a seasonal craft beer, a signature cocktail, or your favorite wine. When you visit our Riverside location, you'll feel like you're on vacation when you're only a stone's throw from home. Visit us on Roosevelt Drive in Seymour or at StonesThrowCT.com.
Well, there's still a bite out on the water. Most anglers have decided to stow the gear for the winter. Just because Mother Nature isn't cooperating doesn't mean you can't see the latest models of all your favorite gear. With 2 convenient locations, it couldn't be easier to get your fix of summer. Boater, beach bum, fisherman, or simply love the New England coast, this is a unique place to shop. The Dock Shop, 51 Tokenique Road, Darien, 609 Riverside Avenue, Westport, or on the web, dockshop.com.
Are you looking for new opportunity this year? How does growing a business with unlimited income potential sound? Christy Kinsman is a local entrepreneur building a global health and wellness business in Fairfield County. Offering cutting-edge anti-aging skincare, all botanically based and paraben-free, and a complete vegan, clean-eating nutritional plan, Christy's looking for business partners that can help get others healthier while taking advantage of an untapped market. Take that first step to freedom from the 9-to-5 grind by learning more about the products and our mentorship program. Contact Christy at thelittlehouseshop@yahoo.com.
Give your day a jumpstart with the latest news, sports, weather, and more on Coffee Break, live on the HAN Network, weekdays at 11 a.m. Connecticut news doesn't get any more local than on Coffee Break.
The Drive, Fairfield County's real motivational talk show here on the HN Network every Tuesday. We're talking to Kit Shapiro. Well, you are an incredible entrepreneur. You've had a career in modeling. You are advocating for the Colon Cancer Society. Right. Your mom passed.
My mother passed from colon cancer, yes.
Tell us about you. What makes you you, and what are you doing with all that great underpinning?
So it's so interesting, and I talk so much about my mother and I were so close, and my modeling, I modeled a little bit because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. As 20-something, I didn't really have a sense of where I wanted, what path I wanted to go on. And when I was pregnant with my son, who's now almost 27 years old, my mother said, work for my production, work for me, because she didn't trust managers or agents or lawyers or any of those people, and she's always said to me, you're going to get it in the long run, so, you steal from me now, or you steal from me, you get it when I die, you might. Right. So instead of having some stranger steal her money, she figured I would get it. So I worked for my mother for for 27 or 30 years practically, because it was prior, I guess it was before my son was born, but so I became, we were more dependent on each other. She was mostly dependent on me, and I, was with her all the time, and we lived, 3 miles away from each other. She lived in Weston, I live in Westport. And so when she died from colon cancer, after having never had a colonoscopy, which, by the way, everybody go get tested, get your colonoscopies.
It's colonoscopy month.
It's Colon Cancer Awareness Month. It's March Colon Cancer Awareness Month. Go get tested. There's many different tests that aren't as invasive, and it's never too young. Colon cancer is the third largest cancer killer in the United States. So we all need to talk to each other about it. It's not as sexy as talking about our breasts, I realize, unless you're a 12-year-old boy, and then all bathroom humor is great. It's great. So when my mother died, it's like my father had long been and had passed. My parents were divorced when I was 5, so I didn't really have the same closeness with my father. But then, you sort of, who am I? What am I?
Now
what do I do? What do I do now? My meal ticket just died. I'm saying that. That's a joke.
Right.
But, my identity of being the daughter of being, Eartha Kitt's, president of Eartha Kitt Productions, of all these things that had to do with her, was no longer there. It was gone, and it gone like that. My mother
Christmas.
my mother died on Christmas Day, 2008. And, I know that many people feel this when their kids leave to go to school, you're empty nesters, and it's sort of like, now what do I do?
There's a void.
And,
Like
how do
skin.
I identify myself if I'm not, if I'm no longer this, and then my kids we're getting older. And so I've had to sort of reinvent myself, as we all do, especially women. And we reinvent ourselves so many times during our lives.
Boy, do I know that.
And even when our kids are living at home, we still have to reinvent from being, the mother of a toddler to the mother of a young adult to mother of a teenager.
Now we have to be the youthful mothers. Yes, it doesn't stop.
It doesn't stop.
No.
So I decided, my mother had said my entire life, when I die, don't let what I have created die with me. Movies, songs, all those things live on because of the nature of them, and other people own licenses, and that goes on. But what I have created, what I have touched, what I've written, is your legacy, and you need to then take it and do something with it.
And that's what you're doing.
And so that's sort of where, after that first year, because the first year of her passing was really, I didn't even know which way to look, how to walk, it was very, very difficult. But after that first year, when I started to realize I can't just sit here, I've got to do something, or she's going to come back and haunt me if I waste all this time. So I started to go through her writings and realize that there's so much richness there, and so many these words that speak to all of us.
Right.
I had an amazing relationship, and I was blessed to have a mother who was how she was, and the connection that we had together, and we both knew that during our lives together, not just after she passed. But many people have relationships. Maybe it's not a mother, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a father, maybe it's a grandmother, an aunt.
Mentor.
Some type of person that's had an impact on their lives and has said something that we want to hold on to. And so taking those words and doing something with them was what I started to, how the process started, one foot in front of the other.
Mm-hmm.
And, I ended up on this path of creating a line of accessories that say something.
Yeah, and they are fabulous.
Thank
and I
you.
see you have your mother's
I have my mother. So
heart.
this is my mother's hand-drawn heart. And on the other side, it says, "Here's to life," which are the words to the song that she closed her concerts with.
Ah.
And I've used this hand-drawn heart in many, many designs.
I noticed.
Because it's, my mother's imprint that I pass on and share. We can all share kindness and caring. And so I look at it is my turn to give voice to my mother's words.
And so you've had this a business, Simply Eartha, for about 3 years, am I
Yes,
right?
it's about 3
and
years
we can
now.
find it at www.simplyeartha.com. And there's a link to your
Simpleeartha.com.
mom's website off
Yes.
of your site.
Right.
And-
TheEarthaKit.com, yes.
So you've also evolved into being on the board of the colon.
I'm on the board of the Colon Cancer Alliance, based in Washington, D.C., and we talk about the importance of early detection and screenings.
So should we give someone a website there so they can check out whatever it is? Because you said there's some less evasive processes, and I know people
Yes.
get very scared of that. They don't want to have to deal with drinking the stuff, and oh my God, and I'm out of work.
I know.
And blah, blah,
It
blah.
is. People don't appreciate. Don't really want to go through the process. Although it's really not a big deal.
No, it
Especially now,
isn't.
the PrEP is just not such a big deal. But the Colon Cancer Alliance, which is based at ccalliance.org, and they are in Washington D.C., as I said. And the people there are just amazing. The amount of knowledge that they give and support for all different stages for caregivers. You know, being a caregiver is not an easy
That's
role.
exhausting.
It's very, very difficult. And I was my mother's caregiver and was with her when she passed. And, you know, I mean, I look at it as a blessing because we had such an amazing relationship, and I was lucky to have that, and that continued through her passing and still to this day. But it is exhausting, and it is really, really hard to do.
Any tips for caregivers on what they can do to kind of rejuvenate themselves? Because it's very stressful and depleting. Like, what did you do to kind of keep yourself going through that?
Well, I had my kids, you know, luckily, and my son played hockey, so he was in high school at the time, and that
We
was
saw
a
him
big
on the
thing.
FCX tour here.
Exactly. And so that was a great outlet to be, you know, to you throw yourself into your children. But I also had my mother's sense of humor, and even when she was, you know, suffering, she was still incredibly funny. And so I was, you know, as sad as it was, we were able to laugh with each other at the same time. And I think that memories are really, really important, and keeping something close to you, you know. And I keep my mother's things, some of the things that are important to me, close to me. And that, you know, you do have to take time and realize, I think writing down your feelings is sometimes, even if you never look at them again, because I know sometimes I don't want to read what I've written, if you just write it, I don't care if you throw it in the garbage, but write it down, because putting it out there, it helps release it. And sometimes we keep stuff up so tightly because we don't want to feel it, or because we're afraid that once we start to feel it, we'll never stop feeling it.
Right.
And
I'm a
think
big
that writing-
proponent of writing it
Me
down.
too. I'm a huge proponent. I tell my kids all the time, write it down.
So beyond all the charity work you're doing and running an organization, what is it that keeps you balanced? Do you do any yoga? Do you hike? Do you run the compost pile?
I am not quite as organic as my mother would want me to be, but I do a lot. I mean, physical fitness is really important. It was important to my mother. She was a dancer. We were
She had a fabulous shape her whole life.
literally to the day she died. But she, you know, she didn't believe you had to go to a gym. You know, she said you could do a workout just cleaning your house.
Yeah, that's true.
Or just gardening, or just standing there and doing jumping jacks. I mean, you could just pick up a chair and put it down, pick up a chair. So she believed that you just could use, you know, things that are in our everyday world. You didn't have to spend the money. But I do go to a gym.
Yeah, me too.
I go to a gym and I do yoga.
I love yoga. Yoga's great for me.
I also like silence. I'm very big on sitting in silence or being in the house without any external sounds of music, as much as I love music. So there are times when I just sit and think of maybe nothing. I do meditate.
It's very important to have some quiet, reflective time
Yes.
and do nothing. Silence is a big one for me too. Well, that's part of the daily drive practice. And a shameless plug there. Sorry, guys.
But like I said, I think writing is such an important. So we talked. You opened up talking about cursive, and I am, you know, all about.
We talked about that on the phone.
Handwriting, because I grew up going to French schools, and Europeans are very much about penmanship. It's really, really an important quality.
Is it true that in France they often ask you to write a handwritten cover letter when interviewing? I read that somewhere in some of my research.
I don't know, because I've never interviewed. I didn't go that far. I grew up, like I said, in French schools in the United States. But penmanship was, you had to have proper penmanship in everything you did, in every test. It was not just about
Because it tells
the
a lot
answers.
about you.
Our personality is in this penmanship. There's so much, And you talk about memory, remembering things, you write it down. Lee Iacocca, I remember reading his book and him talking about the importance of writing it down.
And
our dreams, our wishes.
And even I often say, write it down before it happened. Give it a little juju in the quantum physics field. Write it down.
Absolutely.
I'm so thankful, blah, blah, blah happened. You might call it wishful thinking, but there's something about that ripple, that stone you talked about, when you write it down as if it happened.
I have a book that I keep of desires and wishes, and I go back and look through it and realize how much I had put down as I have actually accomplished or has come to me. And I am a huge believer. And my mother was too. You put it out there in the universe,
it comes back.
As will negativity.
Right.
We are what we think. We think negative thoughts. We're not, even if we think it, we're saying on the outside, I hope it comes, I wish. If we're really believing the negative stuff, that's what we're going to see come back around.
I often say, whatever you trail after I am, you are. So if you say I am blah, 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 then you are that. And so there's a little kind of believe and receive, fake it till you make it. But you're right, that inner dialogue needs to be congruent with the outer dialogue. And I think the magic, second to this, these are the second greatest things. Writing it down is the magic. And that's the creative expression. And that's why I thought it was so fabulous that you were joining me today, because the tenacity, the perseverance, the creative self-expression is so helpful. And I find like people just in general, once you give them a little doorway open into confidence, it opens so many things. And that's through mentoring. So what's next on your list? Where are we going to see you next year? And I hope you'll come back.
I would love to come back. There's so many things that I would like to do. I'd like to write a memoir book on my life, not a tell-all, with wire hanger book about the horrors of how my mother treated me. No, a book about how she raised me and the instinctive, the simplistic, seemingly simplistic ways of existing, and how important it is to really get down to those bare bones and really look at the simple things. She would every day open her eyes and say, "Thank you, God, for letting me open my eyes and see the beauty that exists around me." And that is something that we take for granted.
Did you impart all these wonderful bits of wisdom to your children?
Oh, I would love to say that I did, but no.
Ava says, "Oh, Mom, you're the only person that talks about spirituality and organic food. Just knock it off." I'm like, no, really, there's many people. Watch the show.
When I brought home the organic ketchup, I think that was when my son said, "I'm done." That's it. I've had it. It's enough organic stuff and natural and all this like quantum physics stuff that you've got going on. Yes, I did talk the same way, but I actually spoke it more than my mother lived it. So what I learned was really experiencing it on a simpler level, whereas I tried to maybe beat it into my kids a little too much. But I see, they always
come back
everything, and they pick up everything. And so now there are times when I get that text from my kids and saying, "Okay, I'm you." I realize I am you, Mom.
That is so fabulous. Well, I'm so appreciative that you joined us today, and I hope you'll come back again.
I would love to.
All right, everybody, if you like it, share it, and don't forget to visit www.simplyeartha.com. We will see you next week. It's always a pleasure to enjoy this hour with you. It's The Drive. How you fuel your mind, your body, your spirit definitely creates the life you live. Fuel it well, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much.